just gonna use your audio. You're gonna narrate for me.
Just as no self-respecting anime is complete without an onsen episode, I would be remiss to neglect the Bold Basan bathing experience. Onsen is a Japanese hot spring where people come to wash and relax. Some hot springs are believed to have certain healing properties, and like most things Japanese, there are rules and customs you have to follow. For example, you usually aren't allowed to enter if you have tattoos because of their association with the Yakuza. Another example, you have to wash your body before entering a hot spring, because you're dirty, fool. And the last and perhaps most relevant rule to our discussion today is that to enter, you must be dressed in your birthday suit. Ain't nothing glamorous or romantic about bearing it all in front of a bunch of strange old men. In a certain sense, it did encourage me that they were also keeping up with onsen fashion. It washed away my fear that I was about to go running into a family-friendly pool with all my chips on the table and my cards face up. As for the downside of being in a pool with a bunch of old men, well, I would talk about it, but I think it's just low-hanging fruit. Jokes aside, it was actually quite nice. There were 3 different hot pools of varying temperature and salinity, and I managed about half an hour in 2 before it was time to leave. I didn't stay submerged the entire time because the water was quite hot. Also, I don't think the onsen actually helped anyone's hangover, serving to just dehydrate everyone even more. But damn did it feel good, and for less than 1,000 yen, or 10 Canadian dollars, it's easily affordable. My supervisor in Kuroshio loves fishing, especially squid fishing, so when he invited us to accompany him on his hunt for the kraken, who were we to say no? Unfortunately, stormy weather often interfered the day before our scheduled departure, but one sparkling morning, the skies were clear, the wind was low, and our spirits were high. Getting breakfast and a coffee, we drove to a town called Tsukumo. Once in Tsukumo, the captain greeted us, an elderly Japanese man who had a friendly, crinkled and weathered face. We jumped on a boat and jettisoned off to a quaint wooden raft about 5 minutes from the coast. It was roughly 15 by 15 feet, hammered together and anchored by its 4 corners to the bottom of the sea. It featured a small canopy to block the sun, and a toilet that simply dropped down into the ocean. If we gazed into the water, it was easy to glimpse multiple groups of squid just casually floating around the raft. But squid are highly intelligent, and none of them took the bait that day. Our hopes and dreams of fresh kraken meat were shattered. That being said, within a few minutes my friend caught his first fish ever, reeling it in like a pro. And to our credit, we did catch multiple little fish. It was weird. When you caught them and pulled them up, their body would fill with air, so you actually had to gently puncture them in the side to let the air out. Then they could swim away. If you didn't do this, the fish would just float helplessly in the water upside down and swim in circles. It sounds a little barbaric, but that's what we had to do. At the end of the day, I caught a total of 3 fish. We ended up releasing everything we caught, as the fish were so small that they weren't worth the trouble to eat. It was a relaxing and fun experience. I think squid are out of season now, but perhaps next time I'll catch a fish worthy of being dinner. Another day I got to go on a field trip to the river with some of my students. I was handed a miniature harpoon gun, a fishing net, zero alcohol beer, and told to get my butt in the water. Let me tell you, shrimp hunting is fun, but very difficult. You stand or swim in the river and lift rocks. If you're lucky, a sleepy shrimp will be underneath. Usually I found a dumb fish or a piece of seaweed, but every so often I got lucky. Once you saw a shrimp, you had about 3 to 5 seconds to react. You had to aim your harpoon gun or scoop the shrimp into the net. If you were too slow or the shrimp was too smart, it would jettison away and you would be out of luck. I probably saw about 10 shrimp in 3 hours that I hunted, but never caught one. I did shoot one with my harpoon gun, but the shrimp's defenses were too strong and it simply bounced off. Of course, my students were experts and managed to catch several big shrimp, along with 2 crabs. At lunchtime, one of the Japanese teachers made a campfire, lightly breaded the shrimp and crabs, and threw them in a pot of hot oil. He cooked them at a high temperature for about 15 minutes and sprinkled a little seasoning on top. Then we could eat the crabs and shrimp, shell and all. They were salty and crunchy, a bit like kettle-cooked potato chips, if they were shaped like a crustacean. 10 out of 10 would river again. Japanese schools are really awesome, and here's a perfect example of why. I got to visit a new and relatively small elementary school as a guest ALT. We did a Q&A self-introduction lesson, and everybody had a blast. Notably, I got kids to listen to some Imagine Dragons, which I said was my favorite music. At lunch, during the announcements, a student accurately recounted my name, where I'm from, what my favorite anime is, what my favorite food is, and other obscure facts about me that even I had forgotten by that point. Then he played Imagine Dragons over the intercom for the whole school to enjoy, so I got to eat my lunch listening to my own personal theme song. Love that school. But other schools are just built different. For example, at my regular elementary school, the kids don't want to play games with me and prefer to do their own thing at recess. The grade 6s stand around pretending to be cool and posing, the grade 5s play soccer, and every grade below that can be found digging around in the dirt. They find bugs, salamanders, frogs, and other things that children look for. Then, to my horror, they run up and show me. There was one time at recess where the entire grade 1 class managed to find fistfuls of molted cicada shells. What they did with them, I'm not sure, but I avoided that bunch like the plague. One time at my junior high, I was watching tennis practice and one of my students found this small green bug in his tennis bag. He picked it up, came over to me, and set it on my arm. I had a moment of internal panic and existential terror, but my ALT persona was cool like a cucumber. Turns out it was just a tiny baby praying mantis. It was actually kinda neat, but it was also on my arm, so after a brief inspection, I promptly removed it. COVID ebbs and flows like the tide, washing away plans and hard work. I worked for a few months in a row, never hearing of a single COVID case, and then the next day, schools are closing, clubs are canceled, and trips are nixed. This year alone, 2 different sets of school trips were canceled on my students. If that wasn't bad enough, we were planning an English camp right at the beginning of summer vacation, but the tide of COVID washed in and struck down students and organizers, rendering our machinations all but impossible. I even had to quarantine for a week since I was close contact. The good news is I never got COVID, and instead I got an awesome care package full of fresh food. I'm tired of COVID interfering with people's lives, and I hope we can bounce back from these setbacks twice as strong. My friends and I are planning a trip to Tokyo this summer, and first on the itinerary is Mount Fuji. I'm terrified. There is a Japanese proverb that goes, "A wise man climbs Mount Fuji once, a fool climbs it twice." That's about as foreboding as it gets, especially considering that despite its popularity, Mount Fuji is no slouch of a climb. No doubt, many unprepared and unfit would-be mountaineers have had to commit a walk of shame down the mountain. I don't want to join those ranks, so I've been training. I'm going to climb Mount Fuji, and I'm only doing it once. That's all for now. Take care, and be bold.